The silk dress I'd bought for tonight hung on my bedroom door like a ghost of better intentions. White, elegant, expensive, the kind of dress a woman buys when she still believes her family sees her as more than a walking ATM. I touched the fabric, remembering the saleswoman's smile when I had said it was for a special dinner with my children. Special. The word tasted bitter now. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone, scrolling through the bank alert that had woken me at 3 a.m. Transaction approved. $38,000. The numbers blurred as I read them again. Each digit a small knife twisting in my chest. $38,000 gone. Vanished into the ether of my son Philip's assumptions and his wife's greed. I set the phone down and walked to my kitchen window, watching the Seattle morning unfold in shades of gray. At 62, I'd thought I'd learned to recognize the warning signs of people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to mine. But Philip was my son, my firstborn, the baby I'd nursed through midnight fevers and teenage heartbreak. How could I have been so blind? The memory of last night's dinner played in my head like a cruel movie. Philip, 34 and still wearing that boyish smile that used to melt my heart, had arrived with Stephanie clinging to his arm like expensive jewelry. They'd chosen the restaurant, some trendy place in Bellevue where a glass of wine cost what I used to spend on groceries for a week when I was raising them alone. "Mom, you look wonderful," Philip had said, kissing my cheek with the practiced affection of someone going through the motions. Stephanie had offered her usual air kisses, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light as she adjusted her designer purse. We'd made small talk about the weather, about Stephanie's yoga classes, about Philip's promotion at the tech company where he worked. I'd listened, smiled, and asked the right questions. I'd been the perfect mother, the accommodating widow who knew her place in their busy lives. Then came the moment that should have prepared me for what was coming. "Mom," Philip had said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Stephanie and I have been talking about taking a trip, to reconnect after everything that's been stressful at work." I nodded, thinking they wanted my blessing or perhaps some advice about destinations. I'd traveled extensively with their father before the cancer took him 5 years ago. Richard and I had seen the world together. Europe, Asia, the Caribbean. After his death, I'd stopped traveling. I couldn't bear the thought of those airplane seats and hotel rooms without him beside me. "We were thinking Dubai," Stephanie had added, her voice taking on that breathless quality she used when she wanted something. "There's this amazing resort, the Burj Al Arab. 5 stars, unlimited everything." "That sounds lovely," I'd said, genuinely happy they were prioritizing their marriage. Philip had been working such long hours, and Stephanie had been complaining about feeling neglected. Philip had exchanged a look with his wife, one of those married couple communications that happens without words. "The thing is, Mom, it's pretty expensive. First-class flights, the presidential suite for a week." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air like expensive perfume. I should have said no then. I should have recognized the setup, the way they'd buttered me up with compliments and attention before moving in for the kill. But I was lonely, and they were my children. And when your son says he needs something, 27 years of motherhood doesn't just switch off. "How much are we talking about?" I'd asked. "Well, with everything included, probably around $40,000, Philip had said as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "I know it's a lot, but Mom, you've always said family experiences are more important than money sitting in the bank." Had I said that? I couldn't remember, but it sounded like something I might have said during one of my weaker moments when the loneliness made me philosophical about legacy and love. Stephanie had leaned forward then, her eyes bright with manufactured sincerity. "Susan, you've been so generous over the years. The down payment on our house, the car when Phillips broke down, helping us through that rough patch when he was between jobs. You're like the mother I never had." Ah, the mother she never had. The words had wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket, making me forget about the financial reality. I'd already given them so much over the past 3 years. Nearly $60,000 in loans that had never been repaid in emergencies that seemed to happen with suspicious regularity. "I'll think about it," I'd said, which in the language of mothers everywhere meant yes. Philip had grinned, That same smile he'd used as a toddler when he wanted an extra cookie. Thanks, Mom. I'll send you the details so you can book everything. Your credit is better than ours anyway. They'd left me with the check, of course. $300 for dinner I'd barely touched while they planned their luxury vacation on my dime. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel as doubt crept in like fog off Puget Sound. Now standing in my kitchen with a bank alert glowing accusingly on my phone screen, I knew I'd been played again, but this time felt different. This time, the betrayal cut deeper than money. I walked to my laptop and logged into my bank account, my fingers moving with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The transaction history told the story clearly. $38,000 transferred to Philip's account at 11:47 p.m. He hadn't even waited until morning. He hadn't called to thank me or confirm the details. He'd simply taken what he'd assumed was his. But here's what Philip didn't know about his mother. I might have been lonely and generous to a fault, but I wasn't stupid. I'd built a successful real estate business from nothing after his father died. I'd negotiated million-dollar deals with men who thought I was just a grieving widow they could manipulate. I knew how to protect myself when I needed to. I opened a new browser tab and logged into my credit card accounts. One by one, I reported the cards as lost. New cards would arrive in 7 to 10 business days, but the current ones, the ones Philip had used for this transaction, would be frozen within the hour. Next, I called the airline directly. The Dubai flights were booked for tomorrow morning. First-class seats that cost more than some people's cars. The customer service representative was polite but firm. The tickets were non-refundable, but they could be canceled for a partial credit. I'd like to cancel the reservation, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. May I ask the reason for the cancellation? I paused, looking out at the gray Seattle sky. Fraud, I said simply. The hotel was next. The Burj Al Arab concierge was less accommodating, explaining their strict cancellation policy. But when I mentioned that the reservation had been made without authorization using stolen credit card information, their tone changed quickly. They agreed to cancel the reservation and issue a full refund, though it would take 3 to 5 business days to process. As I worked through each piece of their elaborate vacation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. Not the cruel kind that seeks to hurt others, but the quiet strength that comes from refusing to be victimized. My phone buzzed with a text from Philip. Thanks again for everything, Mom. We'll send pictures from Dubai. I stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone aside without responding. Let him enjoy his gratitude while it lasted. The next call I made was to my lawyer, Maxine Lewis, who'd handled Richard's estate and various real estate transactions over the years. She listened without judgment as I explained the situation. Susan, she said gently, I need to ask, did you give explicit permission for this transaction? I said I'd think about it. I never authorized him to take the money. Then we have grounds for a formal complaint. Are you sure you want to pursue this? It's your son we're talking about. I looked at the white dress hanging on my door, remembering how hopeful I'd felt buying it. How foolish I'd been to believe this dinner was about spending time together rather than extracting money from me. He's counting on that, I said. He's counting on me being too embarrassed or too loving to hold him accountable. But Maxine, I'm 62 years old and I'm tired of being treated like a bank that never asks for collateral. I'll file the paperwork today, she said. Fair warning, this will likely get ugly before it gets better. It's already ugly, I replied. They just think I'm too polite to notice. After I hung up, I sat in my living room surrounded by photos of Philip and his sister Brenda at various ages, birthday parties, graduations, Christmas mornings. In every picture, I was there. The constant presence, the reliable foundation they'd built their lives on. But in how many recent photos was I included? When was the last time either of them had called just to talk without needing something?
My phone rang.
Philip's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, my heart clenched with the old instinct to answer, to smooth things over, to be the accommodating mother I'd trained myself to be. Instead, I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. Then, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I opened my laptop and began searching for travel deals to Dubai. If someone was going to enjoy that paradise, it might as well be me. The sound of pounding on my front door at 7 in the morning would have terrified me a week ago. Today, it felt like music. I took my time walking from the kitchen, where I'd been enjoying my first peaceful cup of coffee in months, savoring each desperate thump against the oak door Richard had installed when we bought this house 30 years ago. Through the peephole, I could see Philip's face contorted with panic and rage. Stephanie stood behind him, still in yesterday's clothes, mascara smeared beneath her eyes like war paint. They looked exactly like what they were. Two people who just discovered their free ride had been canceled. I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged, creating just enough space to see them clearly while maintaining my boundary. Mom, what the hell did you do? Philip's voice cracked with the same indignation he'd shown as a teenager when I'd taken away his video games for breaking curfew. The difference was that he was 34 now, and the games cost $38,000. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. I kept my voice level, almost cheerful. You're up early for someone who should be on a plane to Dubai right about now. Stephanie pushed forward, her usual polished facade completely gone. Susan, please, you have to fix this. The airline says our tickets were canceled. The hotel says there's no reservation, and Philip's credit card was declined when we tried to book a new flight. That's terrible, I said with the same tone I might use to discuss a disappointing weather forecast. Did you try calling your bank? Philip's face flushed red. Don't play dumb, Mom. We know you did something. The bank showed the transfer going through last night, and now suddenly everything's frozen. I studied my son's face, looking for any sign of remorse, any acknowledgement that perhaps taking $38,000 without explicit permission might have been wrong. Instead, I saw only entitlement and fury that his plans had been disrupted. The transfer went through, I confirmed, and then I reported it as fraud because that's what it was, Philip. Fraud. The word hung in the air between us like a slap. Stephanie gasped, actually pressed her hand to her chest in a gesture so theatrical I almost laughed. Fraud. Philip's voice climbed higher. Mom, you said we could go on the trip. I said I'd think about it. Thinking about something and authorizing you to steal from my bank account are two very different things. We didn't steal. You took $38,000 from my account without my explicit permission. In most states, including Washington, that's called theft. And since it was over $2,500, it's a felony. I watched Philip's face go white as the implications sank in. Stephanie looked like she might vomit on my front porch. You wouldn't, Philip whispered. You wouldn't actually press charges against your own son. The old Susan would have melted at the pain in his voice. The old Susan would have opened the door, pulled him into a hug, and figured out how to make this right for everyone. But the old Susan had been buried along with $60,000 in loans and years of being treated like a convenience rather than a person. I already did, I said simply. Maxine filed the papers yesterday afternoon. You'll both be served within the next few days. Stephanie started crying then, big heaving sobs that might have been genuine if I hadn't seen her turn them on and off like a faucet whenever she needed something. Susan, please. This will ruin us. Philip could lose his job if he's charged with a felony. We have a mortgage, car payments. You should have thought of that before you planned a luxury vacation with stolen money. It wasn't stolen, Philip shouted, drawing the attention of my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who was retrieving her newspaper. You're my mother. I'm your son. Families help each other. Help implies asking Philip. Help implies gratitude. Help implies that the assistance flows both ways occasionally. I leaned closer to the gap in the door. When was the last time you helped me with anything? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you included me in anything that didn't involve my wallet? The silence stretched between us, filled only with Stephanie's sniffling and the distant sound of morning traffic. That's not fair, Philip said finally. But his voice had lost its heat. We've been busy. Work is crazy. And I've been lonely. The words came out sharper than I intended, cutting through his excuses like glass. Your father died 5 years ago, and I've been rattling around in this house ever since, wondering why my children only remember I exist when they need money. Something flickered across Philip's face.
Surprise.
Maybe even shame. For a moment, I thought we might actually have a real conversation. Then Stephanie grabbed his arm. Philip, we need to fix this now. Can't you see she's just being emotional? She's probably going through menopause or something. Old women get crazy ideas. I closed the door, not slammed it, not yanked it shut in anger. I simply closed it with the quiet finality of someone who'd heard quite enough. Through the oak, I could hear Stephanie's voice rising in panic, Philip trying to shush her, both of them arguing about what to do next. I walked back to my kitchen and refilled my coffee cup, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. On my laptop screen, the Dubai travel website still glowed with possibilities. 7 days at the Burj Al Arab, the same suite Philip and Stephanie had planned to enjoy. The same amenities, the same luxury, the same paradise. The refund from their canceled reservations had already been processed. Combined with my savings, I could afford the trip easily. I could afford it and still have enough left over to hire a financial advisor to help me protect what remained of my retirement fund from future family emergencies. My phone buzzed with texts. Philip, Mom, please call me. We need to talk. Philip, I'm sorry if I misunderstood about the money.
Can we work this out?
Stephanie. Susan, this is Stephanie. Please don't let pride destroy our family. Philip, the lawyer says you can drop the charges anytime. It doesn't have to go this far. I set the phone aside and clicked Book Now on the Dubai package. If I was going to be painted as the villain in this story, I might as well enjoy the perks. As I filled out the booking form, I thought about the last 5 years. After Richard's funeral, I'd thrown myself into being the perfect mother and grandmother. I'd hosted every holiday, bought every gift, solved every crisis. I'd made myself indispensable to my children's lives while somehow becoming invisible as a person. When had I stopped mattering beyond my bank account? When had my son learned to speak to me with such casual disrespect? When had I taught him that my boundaries were suggestions rather than rules? The booking confirmation appeared on my screen, 7 days in Dubai, departing tomorrow morning. First-class ticket, presidential suite, all the luxury my son had assumed he deserved. I heard their car doors slam outside, the engine starting, the sound of them driving away to deal with the mess they'd created. Part of me ached for the pain I was causing. 27 years of motherhood didn't disappear overnight. But a larger part of me felt something I'd almost forgotten, respect for myself.
My phone rang.
Brenda's name appeared on the screen. My daughter, 31, living in Portland with her husband and 2 young children. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe Brenda was calling just to talk. Maybe she heard about the situation and wanted to. Brenda, Mom, what the hell are you doing to Philip? The hope died as quickly as it had bloomed. Of course, Philip had called his sister. Probably painted himself as the victim of his crazy mother's financial abuse. Hello, Brenda.
How are the kids?
Brenda, don't change the subject. Philip told me you had him arrested for using your credit card.
That's insane, Mom.
He's your son. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. And I didn't have him arrested. I reported fraud, which is what taking someone's money without permission is called. Brenda, you know what he meant when he asked for the trip money? You're just being vindictive because you're lonely. There it was. The family diagnosis of my motivations delivered with a casual cruelty that only comes from people who think they know you better than you know yourself. When was the last time you called me, Brenda, just to talk?
Brenda, I'm busy, Mom.
I have 2 kids under 5 and a full-time job. I can't drop everything to entertain you. I'm not asking you to entertain me. I'm asking you to acknowledge that I exist beyond my ability to solve your problems. Silence on the other end of the line. Then look, if you drop the charges, I'll try to call more often, okay? But this vendetta against Philip is crazy. Brenda, it's not a vendetta. It's a boundary. It's the same thing. No, I said, looking out at the Seattle skyline glittering in the morning sun. It's really not. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my house and made a mental list of the relationships in my life. How many people called because they wanted to hear my voice versus because they needed something? How many conversations focused on my thoughts, my feelings, my dreams rather than my ability to provide. The list was shorter than I'd expected. I opened my laptop again and began researching travel insurance for my Dubai trip. If I was going to start living for myself, I might as well do it properly. The Emirates first-class lounge at SeaTac Airport was nothing like I'd expected. Quiet luxury surrounded me. Soft leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac, and staff who moved like dancers, anticipating needs before they were spoken. I'd arrived 3 hours early, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to savor every moment of this experience my son had assumed was his. I was halfway through my second glass of champagne when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. Detective Parker. Mrs. Stewart, this is Detective Parker with the Seattle Police Department. I'm calling about the fraud report you filed regarding your son, Philip Stewart. My stomach tightened despite my resolve. Hearing it described in such clinical terms, fraud report, police involvement, made the reality settle heavier in my chest. Me? Yes, Detective. How can I help you? Detective Parker. Well, we've reviewed the case, and I wanted to let you know that Mr. Stewart and his wife have requested a meeting. They claimed there was a misunderstanding that you gave verbal permission for the transaction. I took a slow sip of champagne, watching a plane taxi toward the runway. In 6 hours, I'd be on a similar aircraft flying toward a life I'd never dared imagine for myself. There was no misunderstanding, Detective. I explicitly told them I would think about their request. I never authorized them to take the money. I understand, ma'am. The thing is, family financial disputes can be complicated. Sometimes it comes down to he said, she said situations that are difficult to prosecute. I could hear the subtext in his voice. Drop it. Save everyone the trouble. Keep the family peace. It was the same message I'd been receiving from everyone. My feelings, my boundaries, my financial security were less important than avoiding uncomfortable conversations. Detective Parker, if a stranger had accessed my bank account and taken $38,000 without permission, would you consider that theft? Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Then why does sharing DNA with a thief change the nature of the crime? Silence on the other end. Then it doesn't, legally speaking. I just wanted to make sure you understand the potential consequences for your son if we proceed. I understand perfectly, and I want to proceed. After I hung up, I felt a presence beside my chair. A woman about my age, elegantly dressed in a cream silk blouse and perfectly tailored pants, had taken the seat next to mine. I couldn't help but overhear, she said with a slight accent I couldn't place. Family can be the most difficult part of standing up for yourself. I studied her face. Kind eyes, silver hair styled in a chic bob, an expression that suggested she'd been where I was now.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to eavesdrop on your call, she continued.
I'm Elena Vasquez.
I'm waiting for the same flight to Dubai. Susan Stewart. And it's all right. It's not exactly a private conversation anymore. Half of Seattle seems to have an opinion about what I should do.
Elena Smiled.
May I ask what you're doing in Dubai? Business or pleasure? Revenge, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. My son stole money from me to pay for a luxury vacation. I canceled their trip and booked it for myself. I expected judgment, maybe shock. Instead, Elena laughed, a rich, genuine sound that made several other passengers look our way. Good for you, she said. How long has he been treating you like a bank? About 5 years since my husband died, though I'm starting to think it began earlier and I was just too busy enabling it to notice.
Elena nodded knowingly.
I have 3 children. 2 of them see me as a person. 1 sees me as a retirement fund. Guess which one calls most often? We talked for the next 2 hours, sharing stories that were both heartbreaking and liberating. Elena had been a successful architect before retiring, had traveled the world with her late husband, and was now learning to navigate relationships with adult children who had very different ideas about what she owed them. The hardest part, she said as our flight was called, is that everyone expects you to forgive and forget because family is family. But they never expect the family to earn that forgiveness. On the plane, Elena was seated 2 rows behind me, but we'd exchanged information and made plans to meet for dinner at the hotel. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to a conversation that wasn't about what someone needed from me. As the plane lifted off, I watched Seattle disappear beneath the clouds and felt something I hadn't experienced since Richard's death. Possibility. Not just for this trip, but for the life that might come after. I was somewhere over the Atlantic when my phone chimed with a notification that Wi-Fi was available. Against my better judgment, I connected and immediately regretted it. 17 text messages waited for me. Philip, Mom, the police called. This is getting out of hand. Brenda, I can't believe you're actually going through with this. Do you want to destroy our family?
Stephanie, Susan, I'm pregnant.
We found out yesterday. Please don't do this to the father of your grandchild. That last message hit me like a physical blow.
Pregnant.
If it was true, and with Stephanie, that was always a question. It changed nothing legally, but everything emotionally. My potential grandchild growing inside a woman who just called me crazy and menopausal. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the old familiar tug of obligation, the expectation that grandmother trumped everything else, that potential children meant automatic forgiveness for their parents' crimes. But then I thought about the timing, how convenient that this pregnancy revelation came just as the consequences of their actions were becoming real. How perfectly it was designed to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on. If that's true, congratulations. It doesn't change what you did. The responses came quickly. Philip, how can you be so cold? This is your grandchild we're talking about. Brenda, Mom, you're being cruel. Stephanie is scared and stressed because of what you're doing. Stephanie, I can't believe you care more about money than family. I turned off the phone. The flight attendant appeared beside my seat. A young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Is everything all right, Mrs. Stewart? You look upset. Family drama? I said, gesturing at the dark phone screen. They're trying to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. She nodded sympathetically. I see a lot of that in first class. People running away from situations they can't fix by staying. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone is to stop enabling their bad behavior. Even when it's your children, especially when it's your children. I spent the rest of the flight thinking about that conversation, about the difference between helping and enabling, about the way love without boundaries becomes a form of harm, about how my children had learned to use my maternal instincts against me. When we landed in Dubai, the heat hit me like opening an oven door. But stepping into the Burj Al Arab lobby, I felt a different kind of warmth. The satisfaction of claiming something beautiful for myself. The suite was everything Philip and Stephanie had described and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Persian Gulf, marble bathrooms with gold fixtures, a private butler who appeared within minutes of my arrival with champagne and dates. I stood on the balcony looking out at the impossible blue of the water and called my lawyer. Maxine, it's Susan. I'm in Dubai. Good for you. How's the hotel? Exactly as advertised. Listen, I need to ask you something. If Stephanie really is pregnant, does that affect the case at all? Maxine was quiet for a moment. Legally, not at all. Emotionally, that's up to you. They're acting like I should drop everything because there might be a grandchild involved. Susan, let me ask you something. If Stephanie wasn't married to your son, if she was just some stranger who'd stolen $38,000 from you, would her pregnancy make you drop the charges? The answer came immediately.
No.
Then why should it matter that she's family? Actually, shouldn't family be held to a higher standard, not a lower one? After we hung up, I sat in the Egyptian cotton luxury of my hotel robe and made a decision. I opened my laptop and began writing an email to my children. Philip and Brenda, I'm writing this from Dubai, from the suite you assumed was yours. Philip, I want to be very clear about something. This isn't about money. This is about respect. For 5 years, you've treated me like a resource to be managed rather than a person to be loved. You call when you need something. You visit when you want something. You remember I exist when your problems require my solutions. Philip, you took $38,000 from my account without explicit permission. That's theft. Regardless of your assumptions about family obligations, the fact that you're my son doesn't give you the right to steal from me. It should make such behavior unthinkable. Brenda, your response to learning about this wasn't to ask if I was okay or to address your brother's behavior. It was to attack me for defending myself. That tells me everything I need to know about where your loyalties lie. If Stephanie is pregnant, I'm happy for you both, but parenthood doesn't erase theft. A grandchild doesn't grant immunity from consequences. I will not be dropping the charges. I will not be apologizing for standing up for myself. And I will not be discussing this further until you're ready to take responsibility for your actions instead of managing my responses to them. I'm going to spend the next week remembering what it feels like to matter. When I come home, we can talk about what a real relationship between adults looks like. If you're interested, Susan. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone and ordered room service. For the first time in 5 years, I was hungry. The call came on my 4th day in Dubai, just as Elena and I were returning from a morning at the spa. I'd been ignoring my phone for 3 days, letting the messages pile up like snow I refused to shovel. But this call came from Maxine, and I'd asked her to keep me updated on any legal developments. Susan, are you sitting down? I settled into one of the silk-upholstered chairs in my suite, Elena taking the seat across from me with concern etched on her face. We'd become close over the past few days. 2 women who discover the freedom that comes with refusing to be convenient. What's happened? Philip and Stephanie hired a lawyer, a good one. They're claiming you have early-stage dementia, and that's why you're acting irrationally. They're trying to get the charges dismissed on the grounds that you're not mentally competent to make financial decisions. The words hit me like ice water. I felt Elena reach across and squeeze my hand, her face dark with anger. Dementia? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Based on what evidence? They're claiming your sudden personality change and irrational decisions are signs of cognitive decline. They've got statements from both of them describing how you've become paranoid and vindictive since your husband's death. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar surge of doubt that my children had spent years cultivating. Was I being unreasonable? Was this somehow my fault? Then I remembered the past 4 days. The clarity I'd felt. The conversations with Elena, the way my mind had felt sharper than it had in years. Maxine, I want you to arrange for me to be examined by a neurologist as soon as I return. Full cognitive assessment. The works.
Susan, you don't need to.
Yes, I do. If they want to question my mental competence, let's settle it definitively. After we hung up, Elena and I sat in silence for a moment. Finally, she spoke. This is what they do when other manipulations fail. They question your sanity. It's the oldest trick in the book for controlling women who refuse to be controlled. Maybe they're right, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Maybe this whole thing is just me being a bitter old woman who... Elena's voice was sharp. Right now, I've spent 4 days with you, Susan. I've watched you navigate airport security, handle complex hotel reservations, engage in sophisticated conversations about art, politics, and literature. I've seen you make thoughtful, measured decisions about everything from restaurant choices to excursion planning. Does that sound like dementia to you? She was right, and I knew it. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are different things when your own children are calling you crazy. What would you do? I asked.
Elena smiled grimly.
I'd make sure they regret questioning my mental capacity. We spent the afternoon planning. Elena, it turned out, had dealt with similar accusations from her own entitled child, a son who'd tried to have her declared incompetent when she'd refused to fund his 3rd failed business venture. Documentation is everything, she explained as we sat by the pool, laptops open and legal pads spread between us. Every conversation, every text message, every financial decision you've made since your husband's death. We need to build a timeline that shows consistent, rational behavior. I pulled up 5 years of bank statements, credit card records, and investment decisions. The pattern was clear. I'd been careful with money, strategic with investments, generous but not reckless with family gifts. The only irrational decision I'd made was refusing to continue being stolen from. Look at this, I said, pointing to a spreadsheet Elena had helped me create. In 5 years, I've given Philip and Brenda a combined total of $93,000. Car repairs, house down payments, emergency surgeries, credit card debt, student loan payments. Never once did I give without being asked. Never once did I demand repayment. And how much did they give you in return? I scrolled through the records again, looking for any instance of financial support flowing the other direction. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, Mother's Day flowers, small gestures that totaled maybe a few hundred over 5 years. The relationship has been completely one-sided, Elena observed. And now that you've said no once, you're suddenly mentally incompetent. My phone buzzed with a text from Brenda. Mom, we're worried about you. This behavior isn't like you. Please come home, so we can get you the help you need. I showed Elena the message. She read it and shook her head. The gaslighting is impressive.
I'll give them that.
Notice how it's framed. They're worried. They want to help. Your behavior is the problem. Classic manipulation. I typed back, I'm having dinner tonight with Elena Vasquez, former chief architect for the Barcelona Olympic Village. Tomorrow, we're touring the Dubai Museum and attending a lecture on Middle Eastern economics at the American University. On Friday, we're taking a day trip to Abu Dhabi to see the Louvre. Does that sound like the itinerary of someone with dementia? The response came quickly. Who is Elena? You've never mentioned her before. Are you sure she has your best interest at heart? I stared at the message, feeling something crystallize inside me. Even here, even now, they couldn't acknowledge my autonomy. A new friendship was suspicious. My own judgment was questionable. Everything I did was subject to their approval or evaluation. I want to show you something, Elena said, pulling out her phone. She scrolled through her photos until she found what she was looking for. A legal document. This is the court order I got when my son tried to have me declared incompetent. See this part here? The judge noted that attempting to control someone's finances through accusations of mental illness can itself be considered elder abuse. Elder abuse. The words settled into my consciousness, like stones dropping into still water. I'd been so focused on the theft, on the disrespect, that I hadn't considered the larger pattern, the systematic undermining of my confidence, the gradual isolation, the way every boundary I tried to set was reframed as evidence of my declining judgment. Elena, I need to ask you something. How did you find the strength to fight back? Weren't you afraid of losing your relationship with your son? She considered the question carefully. I realized I'd already lost the relationship. What I was fighting for wasn't really my son. It was the ghost of who he used to be, or who I'd hoped he could become. The real relationship had been dead for years. I'd just been too afraid to admit it. That evening, we had dinner at the hotel's rooftop restaurant. The lights of Dubai spread out below us like fallen stars. I felt more like myself than I had in years. Not the anxious mother constantly worried about keeping the peace. Not the lonely widow desperate for any scraps of attention from her children. But Susan, just Susan. I've been thinking about what you said. I told Elena over dessert about already having lost the relationship. You're right. I've been mourning something that was never really there. What do you mean? I keep thinking about the last 5 years, trying to remember moments when my children seemed genuinely happy to see me. Not relieved because I was solving a problem. Not grateful because I was providing money, but just happy. I can't think of any.
Elena nodded sadly.
That's the hardest realization. That you've been loving people who only loved what you could do for them.
My phone rang.
Philip's name was on the screen. After 4 days of silence, I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Mom, thank God. We've been so worried. Brenda told me you're with some stranger who's probably trying to take advantage of you. Her name is Elena, and she's a successful retired architect with her own money. She doesn't need anything from me except friendship. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. This whole trip, the legal thing, it's not you. You've changed since Dad died, and I think you need help. I looked across the table at Elena, who could hear Philip's voice through the phone. She gave me an encouraging nod. Philip, I want you to listen very carefully. I am going to ask you 3 questions, and I want honest answers. Mom, 3 questions? First, in the past year, how many times have you called me just to talk without needing anything? Silence. Second, when was the last time you invited me to your house for dinner? Not because it was a holiday or because you needed something, but just because you wanted my company. More silence. Third, can you name one thing about my life? My interests, my dreams, my daily routine that doesn't involve how I can help you? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, that's not fair, Mom. We've been busy. And you know we love you.
Doi.
Because love isn't a feeling, Philip. It's a behavior. And your behavior toward me has been indistinguishable from that of someone who sees me as a resource rather than a person. You're twisting everything around. You're making us sound like monsters when all we've ever done is treat you like family. No, I said, my voice steady and clear. You've treated me like a bank. There's a difference. After I hung up, Elena and I sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below us. How do you feel? She asked finally. I considered the question. How did I feel? Not guilty for the first time in years. Not anxious about keeping the peace. Not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. Free, I said. I feel free. The next morning, I received an email from Maxine. The neurological evaluation was scheduled for the day after my return. I also had a court date set for 2 weeks later. I was ready for both. Dr. Brenda Kim's office smelled like vanilla and fresh coffee, designed to put patients at ease. I'd chosen her specifically because she was Korean like me, hoping she'd understand the cultural complexities of family obligation and filial duty that made this situation so painful. But as she reviewed my test results, her expression remained professionally neutral. Mrs. Stewart, I'm going to be direct with you. Your cognitive function tests are in the 97th percentile for your age group. Your memory, reasoning, and executive function scores are what I'd expect from someone 20 years younger. I felt Elena squeeze my hand. She'd flown back to Seattle with me, extending her own trip to provide moral support. In the weeks since we'd returned, she'd become the friend I hadn't realized I'd been missing for years. Furthermore, Dr. Kim continued, the financial records you provided show a pattern of careful strategic decision-making over the past 5 years. The timeline of your actions regarding your son's theft demonstrates clear cause and effect reasoning and appropriate boundary setting. She leaned forward, her voice taking on a sharper edge. Mrs. Stewart, in my professional opinion, anyone suggesting you have dementia based on your recent behavior is either grossly misinformed or deliberately manipulative. What you're experiencing isn't cognitive decline. It's clarity. 2 hours later, Maxine and I sat in the courthouse lobby waiting for the hearing. Through the tall windows, I could see Philip and Stephanie approaching with their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who looked like she specialized in making victims feel small. Remember, Maxine said quietly, this isn't about proving they're bad people. It's about establishing that theft is theft, regardless of family relationships. I nodded, smoothing down the white dress I'd finally worn, the one I'd bought for that last dinner that felt like a lifetime ago. Today it felt like armor. The hearing was smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room than a courtroom. Judge Cooper, a woman about my age with kind but sharp eyes, reviewed the case file while we all took our seats. Philip looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Stephanie sat beside him, one hand protectively over her still flat stomach, the pregnancy she was using as a shield. For a moment, my heart clenched with the old maternal instinct to comfort him. Then I remembered the $38,000, the casual dismissal of my feelings, the attempt to have me declared mentally incompetent for refusing to be stolen from. This case, Judge Cooper began, involves a family financial dispute that has escalated to criminal charges. The defendants claim the transaction was authorized verbally. The plaintiff maintains it was theft. I've reviewed the evidence, including bank records, phone logs, and the recent neurological evaluation. She looked directly at Philip and Stephanie. I'm particularly troubled by the defense's claims regarding Mrs. Stewart's mental competence. Dr. Kim's evaluation shows cognitive function in the 97th percentile. Attempting to undermine an alleged victim's credibility through false medical claims is a serious matter. Their lawyer started to object, but Judge Cooper held up a hand. I'm not finished. The evidence shows a clear pattern. Mr. Stewart accessed his mother's account without explicit authorization, regardless of any verbal discussions about it. The amount, $38,000, constitutes grand theft in this state. My heart hammered as she continued. However, given the family relationship and the fact that this appears to be a first offense, I'm offering a plea agreement. Mr. Stewart and Mrs. Stewart Morrison will plead guilty to theft in the third degree, perform 200 hours of community service each, and pay full restitution, plus court costs. They will also attend financial counseling sessions focused on boundaries and family relationships. Community service. Stephanie's voice cracked. Your Honor, I'm pregnant. I can't. The pregnancy doesn't exempt you from consequences for your actions. Mrs. Stewart Morrison. Community service can be arranged to accommodate your condition. You'll be working with elderly patients at Sunset Manor Nursing Home, cleaning, organizing, whatever's needed. Perhaps spending time with people who've been abandoned by their families will provide some perspective. I watched Stephanie's face crumble as the reality hit her. 200 hours of actual work cleaning up after people society had discarded. It was more fitting than anything I could have imagined. Philip leaned forward. Your Honor, my mother is destroying our family over money. This punishment seems— Mr. Stewart. Judge Cooper interrupted, her voice ice cold. Your mother didn't destroy your family. You did when you decided her bank account was your emergency fund. When you tried to have her declared mentally incompetent for setting boundaries. When you chose to steal rather than respect her autonomy. She gathered her papers. The plea agreement is non-negotiable. Accept it or we proceed to trial where the potential consequences are much more severe. After the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse with Elena, breathing in the crisp Seattle air. Maxine had gone to file the final paperwork. Philip and Stephanie had left without speaking to me, their lawyer hurrying them away like they were fleeing a crime scene. How do you feel? Elena asked, the same question she'd posed in Dubai. Different, I said, considering it. Not vindicated exactly. Not happy, but settled, like something that was broken has been properly fixed. My phone buzzed with a text from Brenda. I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed Philip's career and made Stephanie so stressed she might lose the baby. Was your revenge worth it? I stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to Elena. The consequences of their actions aren't your responsibility, she said gently. Neither is their stress or their marriage or their career or their pregnancy. You didn't create this situation. You just refused to continue enabling it. I typed back, I didn't destroy anything. I simply stopped allowing myself to be stolen from. If Philip's career can't survive the consequences of his choices, that's his problem to solve. And Brenda, don't contact me again unless you're ready to have an actual relationship based on mutual respect rather than my usefulness to you. Then I blocked her number. There, I said to Elena. That's the last bridge. How does it feel? Liberating. 3 months later, I was in my garden when Mrs. Patterson from next door waved me over to the fence. Susan, dear, there's a young woman at your front door. She says she's your granddaughter. I walked around to the front of the house, wiping dirt from my hands. A teenage girl stood on my porch, maybe 16, with Philip's dark eyes and my own stubborn chin. She was thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days, and she looked nervous. Grandma Susan. Her voice was small, uncertain. I'm Amy, Philip's daughter from his first marriage. I stared at her, my mind reeling. Philip had been married briefly in his early 20s before Stephanie. There had been a baby, but he'd lost contact when his ex-wife moved to California. I'd sent birthday cards to an address that eventually started returning them as undeliverable. Amy, I breathed. Oh my God, you're so grown up. Dad doesn't know I'm here, she said quickly. Mom gave me your address. She said you used to send cards, and I thought maybe you'd want to know me. For the next hour, we sat in my kitchen drinking tea while Amy told me her story. Her mother had remarried when she was 3. Her stepfather was kind but distant. Philip had disappeared from her life completely after the divorce, never paying support, never visiting, never acknowledging her existence. I found out about the court case from a friend who saw it in the newspaper, she said. I looked up what happened, and I wasn't surprised. Dad always was good at taking what wasn't his. What about your mother? How is she? Amy's face darkened. She died last year. Cancer. That's when I came to live with my stepfather. But he's getting remarried, and his new wife doesn't want me around. My heart broke for this child who'd been abandoned twice. First by my son, and now by circumstances beyond her control. Where are you living now? Foster care. It's not bad, but it's not family, you know. I did know. I'd been living in a family that wasn't really family for years. Amy, would you like to stay for dinner? I was just making pasta. Her face lit up with the kind of genuine joy I hadn't seen from a family member in years. Really? You don't mind? I don't mind at all. As we cooked together, I learned that Amy was an honor student, that she loved art and astronomy, that she'd been working part-time jobs since she was 14 to help her sick mother. She was everything Philip and Stephanie weren't: grateful, thoughtful, genuinely interested in other people. Grandma Susan, she said as we sat down to eat. Can I ask you something? Anything. Would it be okay if I visited sometimes? I know Dad probably wouldn't like it, but I don't really care what he thinks anymore. I reached across the table and took her hand. Amy, you can visit whenever you want. In fact, if you need a place to stay while you finish high school, you're welcome here. Her eyes filled with tears. You do that? Even after what Dad did to you? You're not responsible for your father's choices. And frankly, you seem to be the only member of this family who actually turned out well. 6 months later, Amy was living with me permanently. The foster care system had been relieved to place her with family, and I'd been thrilled to have a young person in the house who saw me as a person rather than a resource. She was painting at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang one Saturday morning. Through the peephole, I saw Philip standing on my porch, alone this time, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Mom, we need to talk about what? About Amy. I know she's been staying here, and I think we should. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it.
No, Philip.
You gave up any say in Amy's life when you abandoned her 16 years ago. You don't get to suddenly become a concerned father now that it's convenient. She's my daughter. Biologically, yes. In every way that matters, no. You've never paid a dime of support, never sent a birthday card, never even asked about her until now. What exactly do you think gives you the right to an opinion about her life? I want to make things right. With her, or with me? Philip looked down at his feet. Both, I guess. It's too late for us, Philip. You made that choice when you tried to have me declared mentally incompetent for refusing to be stolen from. But Amy, she's 17 years old with 1 year of high school left. She's an honor student who's never been in trouble, never asked anyone for anything she didn't earn. She's staying with me because she chooses to, not because I'm bribing her with money or manipulating her emotions. Mom, please. Stephanie and I are divorced now. She was having an affair. You were right about her. I felt a flicker of the old sympathy, quickly suppressed. I'm sorry your marriage failed, Philip, but that doesn't change what you did to me. I know I messed up. I miss having a family. Then you should have thought of that before you decided to treat your family like a bank. I started to close the door, then paused. Philip, if you want a relationship with Amy, that's between you and her. But understand this. She's seen what real love looks like now. She knows the difference between someone who cares about her and someone who sees her as useful. If you want her in your life, you'll have to earn it. And given your track record, that's going to take a very long time. I closed the door and walked back to the kitchen where Amy was still painting. She looked up as I entered. Was that Dad? Yes. What did he want? To explain himself. To make things right. Amy nodded thoughtfully. Do you think he means it this time? I think he means it right now. Whether he'll still mean it when it requires actual work and sacrifice is another question entirely. She smiled and went back to her painting. Well, I'm not going anywhere. This is the first place that's ever felt like home. I looked at the girl who'd shown up on my doorstep 6 months ago. Scared, abandoned, looking for connection. Now she was thriving, painting in the afternoon light, planning for college, talking about her dreams. She'd given me something my own children never had. A relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Good, I said, meaning it completely, because I'm not going anywhere either. That evening, Elena called from Barcelona, where she was visiting her daughter, the one who actually loved her rather than her bank account. How are things with Amy? She asked. Perfect. She's teaching me about TikTok, and I'm teaching her about investing. It's the family relationship I always thought I wanted. And Philip is still trying to convince me that his remorse is real. I'm not interested in finding out. Good for you. Some bridges should stay burned. After we hung up, I sat in my garden watching Amy through the kitchen window as she did her homework. At 62, I'd finally learned the difference between love and convenience, between family and biology, between forgiveness and enabling. I'd lost 2 children but gained something infinitely more valuable: my self-respect, a true friend in Elena, and a granddaughter who saw me as a person worth knowing. The $38,000 had been the best money I'd ever spent. Not because I got it back, though the restitution payments were coming along nicely, but because it had finally shown me who I really was and who the people around me really were. And for the first time in 5 years, that person was someone I was proud to be.